Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Zevachim, Daf Lamed Tes. We are going to begin on Lamed Ches Amud Beis, about halfway through the Amud by the two dots. So it says, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Shalosh Matanais Shebachatos, regarding the last three sprinklings of a carbon chatos, Enu Bois B'Layla. The Zrikas Adam should not come during the nighttime. Says Rashi, now, Afalpi she'enon ma'akvos. So we said in our Mishnah that Machoks Beisham Beis Hillel, if you only need to do one blood application or possibly two. So then the question is, why are we so strict when it comes to the Zrikas Adam, if you don't even have to do it to be Yaitse? So on this Rashi continues and says that V'lav Zrika Gemorahi Miu Dam Nissel B'Shkias Achama. Dam could still passel the carbon when it comes to Shkias Achama. Come on. Okay. So the point is that even though it's true, technically, if you don't do it, it's okay. But nonetheless, once it was done, it's got to be done properly. And what does that mean? Says Rashi, Imnasan matana rishaina. Let's say a person did the first blood application, umesu baleha, and then afterwards the owner dies. Kfar chiper rishaina. Vein shem chatus kamura al adam oid lepasim mishum chatus shemesu baleha. We said there's 5 different situations by chatos, vlad chatos, temuras chatos, keeper baleha. So one of them is mace baleha. When you have a carbon chatos in which before it was brought, the owner died, so then we say mesu, that it dies. However, because the zrika was already done first, at least some of it, and then the owner dies, we say that he already achieved kapara by the first sprinkling. And therefore, as he says, V'ein shem chatas kamura al hadam oid lepasim shem chatas shemesu balel. So we no longer apply this din of when the owner dies, because at least the first rika was done. Veha mal mehen b'chutz chayiv. Back in Rashi, let's say a person takes it outside, hazarik oisen b'chutz, you sprinkle the blood outside of its proper place, chayiv. Why? Shahari ruyos lifnim b'toras zrika gemura, because you were supposed to do it properly inside, so therefore, even if it's the last 3 ones, it doesn't make any difference. The also litnan b'layla, it can't be done at night. The nifsel mulizroik v'hazrikihi. It is a zrika. Bezar chayv alehen misa b'fnim. A non-kohen is chayv if he does the avoda of zrika, even the last one's b'fnim. Utunis klisharis. It still needs a klisharis. Umatana etzba. Use the finger. V'kibus im nitats madam hachatas al habeged. If it spills on a garment, even though you already did the first sprinkling, to own kibus, you still need to wash the garments. It's keilu like it spilled before. But let's say instead that even though you did one, according to Beis Hillel, but still you didn't complete it, and then you still have to apply the dinim. But what if the whole thing was already done? And then there's leftover blood, it spills on the garment, then ein tain kibus. In that situation, you do not need to. Okay. So there are those in the beginning, and there are those in the end. What does that mean? When it comes to the 3 sprinklings, besofo, so we have chutz v'layla, zoris ukli sharis, Karen be'etzba kibas v'shirayim kivat chilasan. That we just established in our Gemara, as Rashi said, that if you're not allowed to do the zrika b'chutz, even the other ones, cannot be done at night. A non-kohen can't do it. Must be done with a klisharis on the karen by the etzba of the finger. And if it gets on your garment, you have to wash that garment. And then it says v'shirayim. What is that? Says Rashi. Chatas shekibel dama ba'arba kaisais. Let's say you have a carbon chatas, and that the dam was actually makabel in 4 different cups. The nasa matana achas mikol echad, and you do one matana from each of those 4 cups respectively. So then kula nasu shirayim liyishavach liyisoid. Then you have to pour all 4 garments on 4 kosos onto the yisoid. Af hagimel kosos shirayim shalhen kamo rishayim. Even though you would think, well, the first cup where you did the first blood application, which is the only one which is really ma'akev, so then maybe the other ones aren't even considered shirayim, and it wouldn't go poured on the yisod. Maybe it just gets spilled on the amma. Okay, fine. However, Misa, if he died in the middle after the first sprinkling, so we said in that situation that we don't go after the end. We say, okay, at least he did one sprinkling. We go after the first one, and therefore it's not considered like chatash meis baleha. Lo shireha. There's no heter. It says Rashi a basar. Kishkfar hutter was already allowed. Voma falga. Here's a big one. It says Rashi, Im nasan harishayna b'shtika. Let's say your first zrika was done properly, b'sholish b'machshava lo pigel, the kosher. Because only the first one is ma'akev, so therefore, if you would have had a pigel thought of chutz l'zman or chutz l'kaimai by the other zrikas 2, 3, and 4, then it's no pigel. V'oleha l'goy kasafan. And if you would bring the rest in l'gavoy inside, then it's kisafon. So fine. How do I know that it requires kibus? Dinan, because it says, and let's get the pasuk. Nitaz minatzavor al habeg, and let's say it's spilled from the neck onto the garment, enoton kibus. Then you do not need to wash it. Mina karen umini yasoid. Let's say it got on your garment from the karen or from the yasoid when you spilled the shirayim, enoton kibus. Hamin haroy karen, but something which is fit to go on it, which means it hasn't gone on there yet. Ton kibus. Then that does require cleaning of the garment, because even though it's true you already did one zrika, but we still say that the other zrikas you would have to still do kibus on your kibus begadim. Right? So, but we know that's not true because it's shirayim, which means you already did all the sprinkling, and then you're just about to pour it onto the yesod, the leftover, and before you did it, it spilled on you, so then you would have to do kibus. We don't have to do kibus then either. So Asher Yasek Siv. The pasuk says Asher Yasa Prat Lazesh Kvar Huza. So we already know someone who's already sprinkled, obviously there's no kibus. We already know that from that pasuk. So Hama Niram Nechemia. The Sanyum Nechemia Oimer Shirei Adam. When it comes to the leftover bloods, Shek Riven B'chutz, if you bring it outside, chayiv. So aim the Shema Nechemia Le'inyan Halah. That has to do with bringing it outside. It has the same status as the as the fats and the limbs. Says Rashi, the lav damim ninhu. It's not, those obviously we're not talking about blood, but nonetheless, since it's supposed to be done inside, anything that's brought outside, we know is you're gonna be chayiv. So in kibus mishamalei, but when it comes to kibus, who says that that's what he's talking about? maybe he's only talking about things in which is fit to be done inside. But here, when it comes to having some blood on a garment, how do you know it requires kibus? So our answer's in, all right, and I'll tell you yes. He still says the same thing when it comes to this. V'asanya, and Rashi says b'nechusa. It's an important Rashi. There's a proof to it. How do we see that? Damim ha'te'unin yisoid. So it says, when it comes to blood, it requires the shirayim to be put and spilled into the yisoid. Te'unin kibus. So you still need to launder your garment when it comes to that. And even a machshava, while you're spilling it, if you have the intention, let's say, to eat the meat tomorrow, according to him, interestingly enough, he says it would still be pigul, even though it's after the zrika. And this is actually the key line. He says that if it's done outside, so you're chayiv. So even when it comes to this, when it comes to the bloods which are spilled just on the amma, ain't tuning kibos. We know that does not require kibos. It's only if it's spilled onto the site. Furthermore, vein machshava mo'elos mehen, because that's not part of the avoda, and therefore because of that it's just spilled onto the amma, but it's again doesn't have any connection to the avoda, and therefore improper machshava won't do anything at that stage. V'hal mehen b'chutz potter. If it's brought outside, it's potter because it's again not really an avoda. So man shamal mehen b'chutz chayim, which is again on the first statement, the second line up top. The garmer ton kibus, and he says it requires kibus. So there you go. Okay, let's go a little further. Is it true that having a machshava of pigul, that it's actually going to cause pigul even at that stage? Lasanya. It says yotzu shirayim v'kataris imorim shein ma'akvin es hakapara shein machshava moelas behen. When it comes to the shirayim, which is you already did the zrika, so therefore at the time of the applications of onto the yesod, so it shouldn't cause pigul at that time. So where it says ki tanyahi b'shalosh matanos shebechatos. So what is that referring to? So as Rashi says, l'oilam b'shirayim u'kaman di'oim kaman shirayim hapanimim ma'akve. This is talking about the panimim, which is ma'akev, and therefore it's considered to be pigul l'inyan chutz and l'inyan kibus. Okay, fine. So again, kitanya hi b'shalosh matanos shebechatos. So if that's the case, tu'un yisoid l'karen azli. What does it mean yisoid? If that's what we're talking about, it's supposed to go into the karen of the mizbeach. Ema, so you should say nitayin yisoid, that the remaining blood will end up going to the yisod. But of course, the original goes to the karen. U'machshava moelos behen. And it said that even having a pigul thought at that stage, also of chuslas mal chusam kaimo, will passel. It says clearly that v'lo mafalga, there isn't pilgul. Ela kitanyahi b'damim hapanimim. We're talking about the inner dam of a b'dam achitzainim mai potter. So you're right. When it comes to damim hapanimim, which is ma'akev, right? Because you have to do the whole thing. It's not just one. So therefore, we're more strict when it comes to the damim hapanimim. However, when it comes to damim chitzainim, then you would be potter. So if that's the case, so adatani damim hanishfachim amma. Why do we make a distinction between pouring onto the amma and onto the yisod? And say maybe we're only strict when it comes to damim hapanimim of a damim hachitzainim potter. So hamani ram nechemi he diamer shirei adam shekriban b'chutz chayiv. Because we said, we hold like the Nehemiah, that when it comes to even the leftover dam that's being brought outside, even the shirayim, you are chayiv. V'lomasnila tlasa peturi l'bahadi tlasa lechayuba. And we don't mention 3, says Rashi, detana v'lotani le tlasa patri b'chitzainim bahadi tlasa lechayuvi detana b'hanimim. Debishlam b'kibos uv'machshava matzi leflugi. Ava b'ha'allah chutz lo matzi lemisni. So he doesn't mention anything about going outside. He's only really talking only about kibos and pigul. Ravina oimer min karen mamish min yisod min haroyel yisod. That's what it's actually referring to. It says Rashi, according to you, that says min yisod hu enu intoin kibos ha min haroyel yisod. So, which means it's not even. It's just shirayim. You already know this rika. Nonetheless, it still works. That's not a question. Mina Karen mamish kaimer. Ha mina royal Karen can go in sholish matanos shemachatos toin kibos krab papa. Okay. So Amalei Rav Tachlifa bar Gaza Ravina. Ema, why do we say idi royhu? Hi my hashda royal Karen amrin lo. If we're talking about if it's fit to go into the Karen, we said no. Royally yisod me boy. Elo mina Karen mamish. Mini yisod, mini haroy yisod. Okay. Let's look at a couple of questions. As I nurse my throat a little bit. Let's start off by looking at TA 18. Shalosh matanos achronos shebechatos le'inyan dal dvarim enon dinan kishirayim. There has the same din as the shirayim, right? 3 of them. So he said bois leachar misa, lo sharia, lo mafalga, lo ayla gavoy, hainu shein nifsalois bekibosim lifnim. Okay. Let's see if that's the same question here. Okay, fine. Didn't see that. Let's look at question 5. Him shvicha shirayim b'chatas ma'akvis kapara. So is even the shvichas of the shirayim. So we end up saying we made a distinction between the penimis and the chitzonis. So the chitzonis ain't a ma'akvis. That's definitely not ma'akiv. The penimis is a machlokas. Okay. Kol anitnan al mizbech hapanimi v'chulu. So tanabanan, the asa kasher asa. You should do as was done. So what is that referring to? So the pasuk says the asa lapar. You should do for the cow. Kasher asa lapar chatas. Just as we did for the chatas. Ken yasa lo. So too should be done for it. Okay. So, what do we learn up from this pasuk? Mabal lamid lichbol bahazaisai. It's coming to increase or double the sprinkling of it. The limit shim chisar achas b'kol hamatanois lasul klum. That you have to do exactly as is prescribed, and if you don't, then it's like you did nothing. Fine. So, ainli ela matan sheva shema akvois b'chol makim. I can understand when it comes to the application of the 7 sprinklings on the paroches, which, as we'll see later on what that means, is makim in all places. So, matan dal and menayin. When it comes to the carbon chatas, we said she'in makvus b'chatas achitzayna. So how do we know that when the outer one it's not ma'akiv? How do we know the inner the chatas apanimus is ma'akiv? Ein li'el matan sheva akavois b'chol makom Matan Dalam Menai, Talmud Lemer Kain Yasel Apar, Zeh Par Yom Kippurim. So what is that? And Rashi says, La Shavois Lapar Elam Davar, to compare it to the Par Elam Davar Shel Tzibor, as we learned in Horius, that has the same status. Kain Yasel Apar, Zeh Par Yom Kippurim. Lama Testament Beis. Kasher Asa Lapar, as was done for the Par, Zeh Par Kohen Mashiach. When the Kohen Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol, sins and he has to bring a carbon, also applies to him. The se'ira of those kachavim, which has to be brought for idol worship. You would think maybe we would include them as well. Says Rashi, Lios penimim v'nisrafin, that to be burned, like the carbonos that they're burned. So Talmud Leimer lo Umari so Rabos says Elu Hoitzes Elu. So why are we including the Kohen Gadol and the Sirei Bas Kachavim? So Achashri B'Hakasu B'Miyut, you have a Miyut, which is excluding the Regalim, the Sirei Regalim and Rosh Chodesh. But why are we including the Kohen Gadol, etc.? So Marbanias Elu Shemichaprin Alaveras Mitzvah Dua, because it's causing a kapara for an avera which was known. Mitzvah Yedua, because says Rashi, when it comes to the sa'ir, which is brought in the regalim, shol yeshavim lo shahari ein daimin lo b'kaparasai she'ilu boyin al tumas mikdash v'kedashav. So the Gemara discusses this in Horius. Is the purpose of that sa'ir to cause a kapara for someone that violates going into the mikdash tameh or eating tameh food, eating food while they have tumas aguf? Shein bo yadiyah lo b'tchil lo b'sof. They didn't know before and they didn't know afterwards, which means there is no yadiyah. No one knows about it because there's no yadiyah b'tchil v'ad soif. So you can't compare it to someone who actually knew that he sinned. It says you achieve kapara even though you didn't do smicha. You also achieve kapara even if the shirayim were not put onto the son mizbeach achitzayin. So mari isa lisol bahazois lahachshir b'smicha v'shirayim. So why is that? Why is the zrika so important? That it's ma'akev. However, if you skip the smicha, or you didn't put the extras, the shirayim, onto the side, then why is that not a problem? So Amrit Paisel B'Haizais Shema Akvos B'Chol Makim Umashirani B'Smicha V'Shirayim Shema Akvos B'Chol Makim. Because we know when it comes to Zrika in general, that's something which is Ma'akev, right? It's something in which you need to do, right? However, when it comes to Shirayim and the Smicha, we never find that it apostles, and therefore over here as well. Question, we're actually going to stop there. Let's look at question 6. B'parshas par davar hisrabu nami sirei v'eskachavim lahavian b'oisin din hazav v'sreifa. Okay, it has to be burned. So el karbano seirim nismatu. So miyos penimim nisrafim. That's not burned. So we said the siri rosh chodesh and the siri regalim. Umadua elu nismatu ve'elu nisrabu. So why are they excluded? So siri akum nisrabu idol worship mishum de damu apar helam davar. Because when it comes to par helm davar shel tzibor, you realize that you listened to the Beis Din and you made a mistake. So it's coming on a chet yadua, like Tumas Mikdash Kedashav. Pardon me. Let me say it again. When it comes to par helm davar shel tzibor, it's on something you knew about that they paskind. However, when it comes to Siri Regolim or Rosh Chodesh, which is a Machlokas and Horius, exactly what it's Machaper, But let's just say it's mechaper on Tumas Mikdash Kedashav, and that's something in which there's no Yediyah Medchila or Sof, so therefore it's not comparable, and therefore we're not going to compare it to Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor. Rather, we're going to compare Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor to things that are known, such as the Avodah Zarah or the Kohen Gadol, the Par Kohen Mashiach. Okay, let's look at question TA 19. TA 19. How about TA? Yeah, TA 19. Biyasa Kashirasa Achatas Elu Siri Avodah Zarah Madul Amidim Siri Avodah Zarah V'lo Siri Golem Ema Ibcha. Since we had the Siri Avodah Zarah is comparable to Par Helam Davar that the Mechaper on Aver, which is known, excluding the Regolim, which is Mechaper on Tumas Mikdash Kedaisham, which there's no Yediyah Medchil beyond the Seif. Okay. And that actually is the same as TB 19. So I'm going to mark that on Lamed Testament Bays. We'll see in a second if I wrote the correct answer. This is TB 19. I wrote Sir Avodah Zarah Yeshav Yediyah. Okay. The Sir Golem Al Bias Mikdash Below Yediyah Medchila Besof. Okay. It's very good. What I read over here, question 18. This is question 18. So machlokas when it comes to the chatas is a 1 or 2. This is interesting. So Beis Shammai says you have to have 2, right? So therefore, what if you had pigel on the second one? So it could passel. So Indian pigel Beis Shammai Omrim Yesh pigel Ajte Matanos, which is actually would be a chumrah, right? However, he could also be makel. I think I had this, right? Right. So this is actually on Lamed Chesamid Bays. Why I missed this? TB18. Beis Shammai's makel, since you need 2 matanos to become pigel, but it's a chumrah regarding eating the carbon. So let me make sure I can flesh this out again. Ki itchul ahatir itchul dahavilo Beis Shammai l'chumrah. So when it comes to the heter achila, so he's more machmir, that he does not allow the carbon to be eaten until after the second sprinkling. Beis Shammai is which is l'chumrah, right? But he's l'kula that's so Beis Shammai says you only your chay pigel b'shtehen if you have pigel by both of them. Beis Hillel says only ba'achas mehen, right? So that is the difference as well. That's TB 18. Adkan.